All right, so of course we will have a third Wilder versus Fury fight. We don't know when it'll happen. We don't know where it'll happen, but we do know that it is contractually obligated to happen. We don't know the specifics around what does it look like in terms of monetary value. We don't know anything about stadiums. We don't know anything about tickets. We don't even know anything about streaming. But we do know that this fight will happen. The biggest problems and the hurdles that we have to this fight, given our climax, is the climax of the second fight has brought a lot of really touchy subjects to talk upon. And what I mean by that is, well, number one, I don't understand people comparing this third fight to Anthony Joshua versus Andy Ruiz, the rematch, in terms of, the rematch clause. It was under the impression from anybody going into that situation that there would be a rematch between the two guys. The problem with it is that Andy Ruiz agreed to a rematch, but he felt he should have gotten paid more. And what happened? He got paid more. That was the issue behind it. Had nothing to do with anything else except for him wanting to get paid more. And he raised arguments for why he felt like he needed to be paid more. He also stalled himself so that he can get paid. Everything that Andy Ruiz did in the Anthony Joshua rematch talks was for him to get paid more. It had nothing to do with him trying to get out of the rematch because he took the first fight and he took it on short notice at that. So it had nothing to do with that, but Andy Ruiz saw an opportunity to get paid and he wanted to get paid. Much different from this situation where you have with Deontay Wilder and Tyson Fury, where Tyson Fury just doesn't want to take the fucking fight. It's that simple. There is no such, like, Tyson Fury is not talking about money. He's not talking about, where he wants to fight, when he wants to fight. Tyson Fury just doesn't want to take the third fight. And I, for the life of me, can't understand why. A lot of people would love to talk about things such as he doesn't want to take the fight because of the things that Wilder has said about him that came out of the second fight. And while that could be understandable, he's the one that signed the fucking contract, so he has to fight Deontay Wilder a third time. It's that simple, you know? And now they're going to go to a legal battle in which, in this situation, and it's funny and it's really good because I get to use this example now and I get to use it really well. Now I can actually say that Deontay Wilder is doing the exact thing that Lennox Lewis did to Hasim Rahman, which is, guy doesn't want to take a rematch versus you, wants to fight somebody else, and you're like, not going to happen, buddy. Much different situation from Anthony Joshua versus Andy Ruiz, where Andy Ruiz was just like, I want to take the rematch. I want to get paid, though. This one is, Tyson Fury's like, I don't want to take the fight. And Deontay Wilder's like, you're going to have to fight me. You signed for it. And at this point in time, that's the more comparable fight to Lennox Lewis versus Hasim Rahman, where Hasim Rahman didn't want to take the fight against Lennox Lewis. In fact, he went out of his way to sign a contract. He went out of his way to not only sign a contract, but sign a promotional deal to try to get him out of the fight. And it just didn't work out when it came to the courtroom. So when you look at the legal battle things, Tyson Fury is going to have to fight Deontay Wilder a third time, whether anybody likes it or not. Now, one of the things that's very, very subjective that a lot of people have been talking about is the accusations made by Deontay Wilder, where he feels that there are two things that are variables that played, well, you should say three things that are variable that played into this loss against Tyson Fury back earlier in the year. And the big one that I think that at this point doesn't really make much sense is him complaining about the fact that his outfit weighed a ton. I personally, that one just kind of went over my head. Especially considering the fact that you as a fighter, you have complete control over your wardrobe and shit like that. And I understand being a showman, but you don't get to use it as an excuse afterwards, is what I'm saying. Plenty of guys have come into the rings wearing heavy trunks, wearing fur and wearing shit like that. Some guys like to wear lighter trunks so that they can be lighter on their feet. Whatever works to your advantage, you should do. So I don't think he should be using his trunks as an excuse to get out of it. The other 2 points that I do find really interesting is, number one, he feels that his team conspired against him. He felt that his team conspired against him. He felt that Mark Breland conspired against him to stop the fight. something that can be, it's extremely, you know, you can argue it in different ways. The reason why is because Mark Breland, you can say, arguably saved Deontay Wilder from suffering further damage in the ring. And on the flip side, every fighter has been in that position where they hate the fact that something like that happens to them. It's just never going to sit right with them. It's like being a baseball pitcher and it's the bottom of the 8th inning and you've got 2 outs, you've pitched a gem, and you've got the bases loaded at this point, and you've got probably one of the best hitters going up to the plate, and the manager's like, yeah, we'll bring in a reliever. And you're like, no, I'm going to finish this inning. And sometimes things are out of your control. Like some pitchers, they've managed to let their personalities take over, in which managers kind of, took a step back, and it's either led to him getting out of the inning or him getting rocked. It can go any other direction. And on the flip side, you've got a guy who takes a guy out of the game, and then ultimately they either win it or they blow it. And one of the big examples that I could use is this last World Series in Game 6, where you had the Blue Jays pitch, well, not the Blue Jays, I'm sorry, the Rays pitcher pitching an absolute fucking gem through 6 innings. A guy gets on base and you take him out of the game and you lose. Like that's the best way I can equate the situation with Mark Breland. Is Deontay Wilder has every right to change his team to what he feels can be more suited to what he wants to do? Yes. But I also believe that Deontay Wilder also has to think that these guys also play a large responsibility to your health. And if your trainer feels as if you are taking too much damage, he does have the power to stop a fight based off of your health. A trainer will not stop a fight for the sake of stopping it. We've watched fights where a trainer said, that's it for you. I'm not going to let you go out there and continue to lose. And it's just been that way. And we've had trainers who've watched their guy get pitched out 12-0, for the sake of what happens. And last but not least, one of the other subjective ones is the glove situation. And for Deontay Wilder, this is also extremely subjective because one of the biggest and most interesting parts about whenever a fighter has talked about fighting a guy and feeling something that he's never felt before, a lot of times they're right. When you look at, Miguel Cotto, when you look at, Kermit Cintron, and the reason why I mention those 2 guys is because they fought Antonio Margarito. And when you look at the fact that when they fought those guys, they felt something completely different than when they fought hard punchers. And that kind of sparked, their skepticism. And it led to Shane Mosley. And it took really his trainer was the one that kind of just, did all that stuff. And then on the flip side, you also have to think about the fact that if Deontay Wilder went into that fight and if he felt leaving that fight that the punches on Tyson Fury's shots felt completely different in comparison to the punches in the first fight, he has a reason to be skeptical as far as why did those punches feel different. It's not a different glove manufacturer. He didn't suddenly, increase the size of his hands. And I don't really know, and this also ties back to the camp conspiracy, that how did they observe the hand taping? Because that's all that matters. I know a lot of people try to use Felix Trinidad as an example, but Felix Trinidad didn't have loaded gloves. Felix Trinidad was just taping his hands in a way that other boxing commissions allowed that New York State didn't allow. And, God rest his soul, Nazim Richardson, he gave us insight to it. And he said that Margarito and Trinidad were 2 completely different situations. You had one guy who knowingly put plaster in his gloves. And then you have another guy who just taped his hands in a specific way that other boxing commissions allowed you to do, but New York State didn't. So when it comes to the Fury versus Wilder fight, you also have to ask yourself, well, did they observe the hand taping, in a well-performed manner? And ultimately, he also has the ultimate, significance of going back in there for a 3rd fight and proving that the 2nd fight was a fluke. And for a lot of people, this is a trilogy that, we've been wanting in the heavyweight division. I even believe that even things such as the drama and, the level of thought process in terms of how the heavyweight division is. Like, we've missed this for such a long time in the heavyweight division. I like having these types of landscapes in comparison to what we had in the Klitschko era, where you just had a bunch of guys who they knew that whenever it was their turn to fight Klitschko, they would lose. So I think that when it all said and done, I think Wilder gets his third fight against Fury. I don't know where it'll be, when it'll be. But when it's announced, I plan on breaking it down. Of course, you got to break it down. You got to break it down because both fights are completely different from each other. So I think that in this third fight, if the same kind of follows, you will get a completely different fight in the third fight. So that's my thoughts on Wilder versus Fury, the third fight. They're about to go into a litigation battle, so this may drag on for about 3 or 4 months or so.